The courtroom fell silent. Every eye turned toward the trembling girl in the witness stand. Outside, ravens circled Blackthorn Hall like vultures sensing death. Inside, two enemies disguised as spouses stood trial for their marriage, their future, their freedom, and the life of an orphaned child balanced on a knife's edge. The prosecutor's voice cut through the tension. "Tell us, Lady Blackthorn, do you love your husband?" Eliza's throat went dry. One wrong word would destroy everything. The Duke's hand tightened against his leg. 3 months ago, they were strangers. Now they were about to lose it all. But before we get to that breaking point, let me take you back to where this impossible story began. Stay with me through every twist, every betrayal, every dangerous gamble, because this journey goes places you won't expect. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to the beginning. The rain hammered against the cracked window of the boarding house like fists demanding entry. Eliza Whitmore pressed her forehead against the cold glass, watching the carriages roll past through streets that once felt familiar, but now seemed to belong to someone else's life. 3 years since her father's business collapsed. 3 years since the Whitmore name became synonymous with failure and debt. 3 years of fading. You'll catch your death standing there like that. Mrs. Halstead's voice grated from the doorway. The landlady had perfected the art of sounding concerned while making it clear she expected payment, not gratitude. "I'm fine," Eliza said without turning. "Fine doesn't pay rent. It's Thursday." "I know what day it is." "Do you know you're 2 weeks behind?" Eliza finally turned. Mrs. Halstead stood with her arms crossed, her face pinched into that expression of calculated patience that preceded eviction notices. Behind her, the narrow hallway stretched back into shadows that smelled of boiled cabbage and desperation. "I'll have it by Friday," Eliza said. "You said that last Friday." "And I'll say it again if you'd like." "Doesn't change the fact that I don't have it today." Mrs. Halstead's lips thinned. "There are girls who'd kill for your room, younger girls, prettier girls who don't talk back." There it is, Eliza thought. The real threat always came wrapped in compliments for imaginary replacements. She'd heard variations of it for months now, from landlords, from potential employers, from distant relatives who'd made it clear the Whitmore scandal was contagious. "Then rent to them," Eliza said quietly. "But you won't. Because younger, prettier girls don't pay their rent on time either. At least I pay." "When you pay." "When I pay." They stared at each other. Mrs. Halstead broke first, her expression shifting from annoyance to something almost resembling curiosity. "You've got spine, I'll give you that. Stupid spine, but spine. Your mother would have cried." "My mother cried herself to death," Eliza said flatly. "Didn't solve anything," Mrs. Halstead grunted. "Friday then, not Saturday, not next week. Friday, or your things go to the street." She left. Her footsteps creaked down the stairs like a countdown clock. Eliza turned back to the window. The city sprawled below, gas lamps flickering to life as twilight descended. Somewhere out there, people were dining in warm houses, planning futures that extended beyond the next rent payment. Somewhere out there, the life she'd been born to still existed, just not for her. Her reflection stared back from the glass. 23 years old, brown hair that she kept pinned back because she couldn't afford a proper lady's maid. Gray eyes that people described as intelligent when they were being kind and calculating when they weren't. A face that wasn't ugly, but wasn't memorable either. The kind of face that disappeared in crowds. Invisible, she thought. That's what I've become. Invisible. The irony was almost funny. For years, she'd watched her parents scramble to be seen, to be invited to the right parties, to secure the right connections, to maintain the illusion of wealth they didn't actually possess. Her father had invested everything in a shipping venture that sank, literally, in a storm off the coast. When the creditors came, they took everything. The house, the furniture, her mother's jewelry, even the books in her father's study. Her mother hadn't survived the shame. A fever, the doctors said, but Eliza knew better. You could die of a broken heart if you tried hard enough. Her father lasted another year before a stroke took him in his sleep. Eliza had found him slumped in a borrowed chair in a borrowed room, his face peaceful for the first time since the scandal broke. That was 2 years ago. Since then, she'd cobbled together an existence through tutoring, translation work, and occasionally helping merchants' wives compose letters they were too embarrassed to write themselves. It paid just enough to keep her in this room, eating one meal a day and burning through her mother's last good dress at a rate that would leave her in rags by winter. Survival, she'd learned, isn't living. It's just not dying. A knock at the door made her turn. "If you're back about the rent," she started. "I'm not." The voice was female, crisp, with an accent that marked education and money. Eliza opened the door. The woman standing in her doorway didn't belong in a place like this. Her dress was deep blue, perfectly fitted, with none of the desperate alterations that marked second-hand clothing. Her dark hair was swept up beneath a hat that probably cost more than Eliza's entire wardrobe. She was perhaps 40, with sharp eyes that took in the room's poverty in a single glance. "Miss Whitmore?" "Yes." "I'm Mrs. Cordelia Pierce. I believe we should speak." "About what?" "About an opportunity that could solve your immediate problems." "May I come in?" Eliza hesitated. In her experience, opportunities that arrived unannounced usually carried hidden costs, but Mrs. Halstead's footsteps were still echoing in her mind, and the word Friday hung over her like an executioner's blade. "Please," she said, stepping aside. Mrs. Pierce entered with the careful grace of someone accustomed to navigating unfamiliar territory. She didn't sit, probably wise given the state of the chair, but stood near the window, her posture perfect. "I'll be direct," she said. "I represent Duke Rowan Blackthorne." Eliza's stomach went cold. Everyone knew that name. Rowan Blackthorne was one of the most powerful and feared men in the country, a duke who'd inherited his title at 25 after his brother's death, under circumstances people whispered about but never discussed openly. He controlled vast lands, had connections that reached into Parliament, and possessed a reputation for ruthlessness that made grown men nervous. "I don't know the Duke," Eliza said carefully. "No, but he knows of you." "How?" "You tutored the Ashford children last winter. You were efficient, discreet, and notably intelligent. Mrs. Ashford mentioned you to a friend. That friend mentioned you to me. And you mentioned me to a duke?" "Not exactly." Mrs. Pierce turned from the window. "The Duke has a problem. You, Miss Whitmore, might be his solution. I'm not sure what problems a Duke could have that I could possibly solve." The problem of his niece. That caught Eliza off guard. She'd heard rumors about the Blackthorne niece, a child left orphaned after the mysterious death of the Duke's younger brother and his wife, in what was officially called a carriage accident. Unofficially, people said darker things. "What about her?" "Lady Margot Blackthorne is 7 years old. Her paternal grandparents, the Earl and Countess of Ashford, distant relations, are challenging the Duke's guardianship. They filed for custody, claiming that an unmarried man with no household stability cannot provide appropriate care for a young girl. Can't he just hire a governess? He has 3. That's not the issue. The Earl's legal argument centers on the Duke's unmarried status and alleged temperament. They're painting him as emotionally unsuitable, dangerous even." "Is he?" Mrs. Pierce's expression didn't change. "That depends on your definition of dangerous. He's calculating, private. Some would say cold, but he's not cruel, and he loves his niece. Unfortunately, love doesn't win custody battles. Legal strategy does." "And what does this have to do with me?" "The Duke needs a wife, not for affection, for leverage. A marriage would undercut the Earl's arguments about instability and provide the court with evidence of a proper household. It would also send a message to his enemies that he's willing to adapt to secure what he wants." Eliza stared at her. "You're asking me to marry a man I've never met. I'm offering you an arrangement, 1 year. You live at Blackthorne Hall, play the role of his wife in public, help stabilize the household, and assist with his niece's care. In exchange, you'll receive a generous allowance, security, and at the end of the year, if both parties agree, an amicable annulment with enough money to start fresh wherever you choose. And if one party doesn't agree, the contract protects both sides. But the Duke is a man of his word. If you fulfill your obligations, he'll fulfill his." Eliza turned away, her mind racing. It was insane. Marrying a stranger, a powerful, dangerous stranger, for money and security. It was exactly the kind of desperate gamble that had destroyed her father, but it was also a way out. "Why me?" she asked. "Surely there are more suitable women with connections, family, dowries. The Duke doesn't want suitable. He wants unnoticed. You have no family to interfere, no social obligations to complicate things, and no expectations of romance. You're also intelligent enough to navigate the situation and discreet enough not to cause scandal. Most importantly, you need this. Desperate people make reliable partners. They don't rock the boat. The bluntness should have stung, but Eliza found it almost refreshing. No false flattery, no pretense, just the cold calculus of mutual need. How much time do I have to decide? The hearing is in 3 months. The Duke needs to present a united front before then, which means the marriage needs to happen soon. You have until tomorrow evening. That's not enough time. It's all the time there is. Tomorrow at 6, I'll return. If you agree, we'll proceed with arrangements. If not, I'll find someone else. Mrs. Pierce moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. The Duke is not a kind man, Miss Whitmore. He won't charm you or coddle you, but he's fair and he honors his agreements. If you can survive a year in his world, you'll walk away with more than money. You'll walk away with proof that you're stronger than whatever circumstances tried to break you. She left. The door clicked shut. Eliza stood alone in the gathering darkness, her reflection wavering in the window glass. Marry a duke. Become invisible in a different way. Trade one cage for another. But cages, she thought, came in different sizes. And some of them had doors. Why? The next evening, Mrs. Pierce returned at precisely 6 o'clock. Eliza was waiting, her few possessions already packed into a battered trunk. I accept, she said before Mrs. Pierce could speak. You're certain? No, but I'm out of better options. Mrs. Pierce smiled slightly. Honesty. Good. You'll need that. She handed Eliza an envelope. Inside is enough money to settle your debts here and purchase appropriate clothing for the wedding. Simple, elegant, nothing ostentatious. The ceremony will be private, witnessed only by myself and the Duke's solicitor. Afterward, you'll travel to Blackthorn Hall. When? The wedding is in 3 days. Eliza's breath caught. 3 days. 72 hours until her life changed completely. Does the Duke know I've agreed? He knows. He'll meet you at the ceremony. He hasn't even seen me. He's seen a photograph. It was sufficient. Sufficient. Not beautiful, not promising, sufficient. Eliza almost laughed. This was what her life had become. Sufficient for a Duke's legal strategy. One question, she said. The Duke's brother and his wife. Their deaths. What really happened? Mrs. Pierce's expression went carefully blank. A carriage accident. That's the official story. It's the only story. And if you're wise, Miss Whitmore, you won't go looking for others. Some questions are dangerous to ask, even in private. She left. Eliza stood holding the envelope, feeling its weight. Dangerous questions. The warning should have frightened her. Instead, it sparked something she hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. The wedding took place in a small chapel on the edge of the city, far from prying eyes and gossiping tongues. Rain drummed on the roof as Eliza stood in a borrowed dress, not her mother's ruined gown, but something simple Mrs. Pierce had provided, and waited for her groom to arrive. The door opened. Footsteps echoed. Duke Rowan Blackthorn walked in like winter itself. He was tall, over 6 feet, with dark hair and darker eyes that swept over her with the precision of a man evaluating a horse at auction. His face was striking in a harsh way, strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled. He wore black, as if in mourning, though whether for his brother or his freedom, Eliza couldn't tell. He stopped 3 feet away. They studied each other in silence. Miss Whitmore? His voice was deep, controlled, devoid of warmth. Your Grace, I'm told you understand the terms of this arrangement. I do. Then we can proceed. No pleasantries. No reassurances. He turned to the priest as if she were a transaction to be completed, not a person to be married. The ceremony lasted 10 minutes. There were no flowers, no music, no joy, just words recited by rote, witnessed by strangers, binding two people who'd never spoken before this moment. When the priest declared them married, Rowan didn't kiss her. He didn't even touch her. He simply nodded, signed the register, and turned toward the door. The carriage is waiting, he said without looking back. Eliza followed. Behind her, Mrs. Pierce's heels clicked against stone. Welcome to the family, Your Grace, Mrs. Pierce said quietly as Eliza passed. Your Grace, Duchess. The title felt like a costume that didn't fit. Outside, rain hammered down. A black carriage waited, its horses stamping impatiently. Rowan climbed in without offering assistance. Eliza gathered her skirts and followed, settling onto the bench opposite him. The door slammed. The carriage lurched forward. Inside, silence stretched between them like a chasm. Rowan stared out the window, his profile carved from granite. Eliza studied him, trying to read the man she'd just married. "You'll have your own quarters," he said finally, still not looking at her. "We'll maintain separate lives except when public appearances require otherwise. The staff has been informed of your arrival. Mrs. Thorne, the housekeeper, will familiarize you with the household. Your primary responsibility is Margot. Keep her stable, happy, and present a united front when necessary." "Understood." "I don't expect affection, Miss Whitmore. I expect competence." "You'll get both," she said evenly. "And it's your grace now. Or did you forget we're married?" His gaze finally swung to her. For a moment, something flickered in those dark eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or reassessment. "Point taken," he said. "Very well, Your Grace. Welcome to Blackthorn Hall. I hope you survive it." It wasn't a welcome, it was a warning. The carriage rolled on through the rain, carrying them toward an estate Eliza had never seen, toward a child who needed her, toward enemies she hadn't met yet, and toward a future that was anything but certain. She'd made her choice. Now she'd have to live with it. Or die trying. Blackthorn Hall rose from the cliffs like something carved from nightmares. Stone towers clawed at the gray sky, their edges softened by centuries of wind and rain, but their presence no less imposing. The estate sprawled across windswept moorland, isolated by miles of rough terrain and a reputation that kept visitors away. As the carriage climbed the final approach, Eliza pressed her palm against the cold window glass and felt her stomach tighten. "It looks like a prison," she said. "It was," Rowan replied without inflection. 200 years ago. The family acquired it through marriage and decided fortress architecture suited our temperament. Cheerful. We're not a cheerful family. The carriage rolled through iron gates that groaned like wounded animals. Gravel crunched beneath the wheels. When they finally stopped, Rowan stepped out first, again offering no assistance. Eliza climbed down herself, her boots splashing in a puddle that soaked through to her stockings. The front door opened. A woman emerged, 60 if she was a day, gray hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, wearing black that matched the storm clouds overhead. Her face was all angles and suspicion. "Mrs. Thorne," Rowan said, "this is the new Duchess." Mrs. Thorne's gaze raked over Eliza like she was inspecting meat at market. "Your Grace," she said, the title sounding more like an accusation than a greeting. "Mrs. Thorne," Eliza replied evenly. "I've prepared the West Wing chambers as instructed. The staff has been informed. Dinner is at 8. "I'll take my meals in my rooms tonight," Rowan said. "Show her Grace to her quarters and introduce her to Margot tomorrow morning. She'll be tired from the journey." He disappeared into the house before Eliza could respond. Mrs. Thorne watched him go, then turned back to Eliza with an expression that suggested she'd rather be scrubbing floors. "This way." The inside of Blackthorn Hall matched its exterior, all dark wood, stone walls, and shadows that seemed to breathe. Portraits lined the corridors, faces staring down with varying degrees of judgment and disappointment. Eliza's footsteps echoed too loudly. Mrs. Thorne's barely made a sound. They climbed stairs that curved upward into darkness. The west wing stretched before them, a long hallway punctuated by doors that looked like they hadn't been opened in years. "Your chambers," Mrs. Thorne said, opening the last door on the left. The room was large, cold, and impersonal. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, its curtains drawn back to reveal linens that looked expensive but unwelcoming. A fireplace sat empty. 2 windows overlooked the cliffs and the sea beyond, churning gray under the storm. "The Duke's chambers are in the east wing," Mrs. Thorne said. "You won't need to go there. Your trunks will arrive tomorrow. Breakfast is at 7. Don't be late." She left. The door clicked shut with a finality that made Eliza's chest tighten. She stood alone in the cavernous room, listening to the wind howl outside and wondering what the hell she'd gotten herself into. A marriage without warmth. A house that felt like a mausoleum. A husband who looked at her like she was a problem to be managed, not a person to be known. And somewhere in this maze of stone and secrets, a 7-year-old girl who'd lost everything. Eliza walked to the window. Below, the cliffs dropped away to jagged rocks and foaming water. One wrong step and you'd fall forever. Just like this marriage, she thought. One wrong step. She pressed her forehead against the glass and closed her eyes. Morning came too early. A maid knocked at dawn, a mousy girl who couldn't have been more than 16, with wide eyes that darted around like she expected something terrible to happen at any moment. Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but Mrs. Thorne says you're to come down for breakfast and then meet Lady Margot in the nursery. What's your name? Eliza asked. Lucy, ma'am, Your Grace. Sorry. Don't apologize, Lucy. Is there hot water? I'll fetch it now, ma'am. She scurried away. Eliza dragged herself out of bed, every muscle stiff from sleeping in a strange place. The room looked even more depressing in daylight. Bare walls, minimal furniture, nothing personal or warm. She dressed in the same traveling clothes from yesterday, her limited wardrobe a sharp reminder of exactly how far she'd fallen. Breakfast was served in a dining room large enough to host a banquet, but set for one. Eliza sat at the far end of a table that could seat 20 and ate toast while portraits of dead blackthorns judged her from the walls. Mrs. Thorne appeared precisely at 8. Lady Margot is waiting. They climbed more stairs. The nursery was in the south tower, far from both the east and west wings. Isolated, protected, maybe, or hidden. Mrs. Thorne knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for a response. Lady Margot, this is Her Grace, the new Duchess. The room was a stark contrast to the rest of the house. Bright, filled with toys and books, with windows that let in actual light. And in the center of it all, sitting at a small table with a doll in her lap, was a little girl who looked like she'd been carved from ice. Margot Blackthorne had her uncle's dark eyes and dark hair, but where his face was harsh, hers was delicate. She wore a white dress that made her look even paler, and she stared at Eliza without blinking. Hello, Margot, Eliza said, keeping her voice gentle. Margot didn't respond. Mrs. Thorne cleared her throat. Lady Margot, greet Her Grace properly. Still nothing. The child's gaze was unsettling. Too old, too knowing for 7 years. That's all right, Eliza said. We don't have to be formal. May I sit? She didn't wait for permission. She crossed to the table and settled into a chair clearly meant for a child, her knees bumping the underside. Margot watched her with that unblinking stare. I like your doll, Eliza tried. What's her name? Silence. Lady Margot doesn't speak much, Mrs. Thorne said from the doorway. Not since the accident. Then we'll get along well, Eliza said, still looking at Margot. I don't talk much either when I don't have anything to say. Margot's expression flickered. Barely, but it was there. Interest, maybe. Or surprise that an adult wasn't going to force conversation. I'll leave you to it, Mrs. Thorne said, disapproval dripping from every word. Miss Wells, the governess, will return at 10. She left. Eliza and Margot sat in silence. I'm not here to replace your mother, Eliza said finally. I'm not going to pretend I am. But I'm here and I'm not leaving, so if you want to ignore me, that's fine. If you want to talk, that's fine too. And if you want to throw that doll at my head to see what happens, I'll probably duck, but I won't tell your uncle. Margot's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. They sat. Outside, birds called. The clock on the wall ticked. Eliza picked up a book from the table, something about fairy tales, and started reading aloud. Margot didn't stop her. By the third page, the girl had shifted slightly, angling herself toward Eliza's voice. By the end of the chapter, she was almost leaning against Eliza's shoulder. Progress. The days fell into a rhythm. Mornings with Margot, afternoons navigating the house and its hostile staff, evenings alone in her too large room, listening to the wind and wondering if Rowan even remembered she existed. She saw him only at dinner, and only on the third night. He appeared in the dining room like a ghost, taking his seat at the opposite end of the table without preamble. How is Margot? He asked. Adjusting. Is she speaking? No. Has she shown any distress? Not openly. He cut his meat with surgical precision. And you? Are you managing? I'm here, aren't I? His gaze lifted. That's not what I asked. I'm managing, Eliza said. The staff hates me, the house is freezing, and I've been in this dress for 3 days because my trunks still haven't arrived, but I'm managing. Your trunks arrived yesterday. Mrs. Thorne was supposed to inform you. Mrs. Thorne has selective hearing. Rowan's jaw tightened. I'll speak to her. Don't bother, she'll hate me either way. At least now I have reasons to work with. He set down his fork. You're taking this remarkably well. What choice do I have? Fall apart? You'd have me annulled before breakfast. I'm not that ruthless. Yes, you are. You just honor your contracts first. Silence stretched between them. Then, unexpectedly, Rowan's mouth quirked. Not quite a smile, but something adjacent to it. You're more resilient than I expected, he said. I've had practice. So I've heard. He resumed eating. Mrs. Pierce mentioned your family's circumstances. I'm sorry for your losses. I'm not looking for pity. Good. I don't have any to spare. Eliza almost laughed. The man was impossible, cold, blunt, utterly without charm. But there was something almost refreshing about it. No pretense, no false sympathy, just brutal honesty. The hearing is in 10 weeks, Rowan said. The Earl's lawyers will investigate every aspect of our marriage. They'll interview staff, review household records, and look for any evidence that this arrangement is fraudulent. It is fraudulent. Legally, it's not. We're married. The question is whether it's a marriage in substance or just on paper. He met her eyes. They'll ask invasive questions about our relationship, our living arrangements, whether we share a... He paused. Intimacy. Eliza felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. And what do you want me to say? The truth. That we're married, that we respect each other, and that our private matters remain private. They can't prove what doesn't happen behind closed doors, and they can't disprove what might. You want me to lie by omission. I want you to be strategic. There's a difference. Is there? His expression hardened. Do you want to win this case or not? I want to not feel like I'm betraying myself every time I open my mouth. Then perhaps you should have thought of that before you agreed to this. The words landed like a slap. Eliza stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Excuse me, Your Grace. I've suddenly lost my appetite. She left before he could respond. Behind her, she heard his fork clink against his plate, the only sound in the cavernous room. She made it halfway up the stairs before the anger dissolved into something closer to despair. He was right. She'd agreed to this. She'd walked into this cage with her eyes open, and now she was discovering that even gilded cages had bars that cut. A sound stopped her, soft, almost imperceptible. Crying. Eliza followed it to Margot's door. The nursery was dark except for a sliver of moonlight cutting across the floor. Margot sat curled in her bed, her small body shaking with silent sobs. Margot? The girl looked up, her face wet with tears. For a moment, Eliza thought she'd retreat, that the fragile trust they'd been building would shatter. Instead, Margot reached out. Eliza crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. Margot crawled into her lap, pressing her face against Eliza's shoulder. She smelled like soap and sadness. It's all right, Eliza whispered, wrapping her arms around the trembling child. I've got you. Margot's fingers clutched at her dress. The crying continued, silent, desperate, the kind of grief that had been building for months with no outlet. Eliza held her. She didn't offer empty platitudes or promises she couldn't keep. She just held on while the storm broke and the child finally let herself break with it. Sometime later, minutes or hours, she couldn't tell, Margot's breathing evened out. She'd fallen asleep, still clinging to Eliza like a lifeline. Eliza shifted carefully, trying not to wake her. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Rowan stood in the doorway, half-shadowed, watching them. How long has she been crying like this? Eliza asked quietly. Every night since her parents died. And no one comforts her? Mrs. Thorne tried. Miss Wells tried. I tried. His voice was flat. She won't let anyone close. She let me close. Yes. He stepped into the room, his expression unreadable. She did. They looked at each other across the sleeping child. For the first time, Eliza saw something other than calculation in Rowan's eyes. Vulnerability, maybe, or fear that he was failing the one person who mattered. I spoke too harshly at dinner, he said finally. That was unfair. You spoke honestly. I'm just not used to it anymore. Most people aren't. He moved closer, looking down at Margot with an expression that was almost tender. She looks like her mother. Sometimes I can barely stand to look at her because all I see is Catherine. Your brother's wife? Yes. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Margot's forehead. She was kind, warm, everything the Blackthorns aren't supposed to be. Alexander loved her completely. When they died, it destroyed something in this house. How did it happen? His hand froze. I told you. A carriage accident. You told me the official story. There is no other story. But there was. Eliza could see it in the way his shoulders tensed, in the careful blankness of his expression. Whatever had happened to his brother and sister-in-law, it wasn't a simple accident. The Earl thinks you're responsible, she said softly. Rowan's gaze snapped to hers. What? It's the only thing that makes sense. He's not just fighting for custody, he's trying to punish you, which means he blames you for their deaths. He has no proof. Does he need it? Suspicion is enough to destroy a reputation. Rowan's jaw worked. My brother was reckless. He took risks I warned him against. When those risks caught up with him, it wasn't my fault, but the Earl needed someone to blame, and I'm convenient. What kind of risks? The kind we don't discuss. He straightened. Put Margot to bed. We'll talk more tomorrow. Rowan? Tomorrow. He left. Eliza sat holding the sleeping child, her mind churning. A reckless brother, a suspicious death, an Earl seeking revenge disguised as concern for a child, and Rowan, caught in the middle, fighting battles on multiple fronts while trying to protect the one good thing left in his devastated family. She was starting to understand why he'd married a stranger. He didn't need a wife. He needed an ally who had nothing to lose and everything to gain from his survival. She laid Margot down gently, tucking the blankets around her small form. The girl stirred but didn't wake. Eliza stood there for a long moment, looking at this child who'd lost everything, trapped in a house full of ghosts and secrets and adults fighting wars she didn't understand. I won't let them take you, Eliza thought. Whatever this costs me, I won't let them destroy what's left of your family. It was a dangerous promise. But standing there in the moonlit nursery, listening to Margot's soft breathing, Eliza realized she meant it. She was done being invisible, done surviving on the margins. If she was going to be the Duchess of Blackthorn, then she was going to be the kind of Duchess who fought back. The next morning, she found Mrs. Thorne in the kitchen. I need a full inventory of the household, Eliza said without preamble. Staff schedules, supply lists, maintenance records, everything. Mrs. Thorne's eyebrows rose. That's not, I'm the lady of this house. It's exactly my concern. I want everything on my desk by tomorrow morning. The Duke hasn't authorized, the Duke married me. That's all the authorization I need. Eliza leaned forward. You can make this easy or difficult, Mrs. Thorne, but either way, it's happening. They stared at each other. Mrs. Thorne broke first. Tomorrow morning, she said stiffly. Excellent. And one more thing. Lady Margot's chambers are freezing at night. I want a fire lit every evening before bed, and I want extra blankets brought up. Can you manage that, or do I need to do it myself? I'll see to it. Thank you. Eliza walked away, her heart pounding. She'd just declared war on the household staff, but she didn't care. If they were going to win this custody battle, she needed to prove she could run this estate. And if that meant stepping on toes and ruffling feathers, so be it. She found Rowan in his study, a dark room lined with books and maps, smelling of leather and tobacco. He looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his face. I'm taking over household management, Eliza said. I need access to the accounts and authority to make changes where necessary. It's exactly what a real wife would do. The Earl's lawyers are going to look for evidence of a functioning household. Right now, this place runs like a military barracks, cold, efficient, and utterly devoid of anything resembling a home. That needs to change. Rowan set down his pen. And you think you can accomplish that in 10 weeks? I think I can accomplish more than you have in 3 years. No offense. Some taken. Good. I need the accounts, authorization to hire and dismiss staff if necessary, and your support when Mrs. Thorne inevitably complains to you. He studied her. You're serious? Completely. Why? Because Margot deserves better than this mausoleum. Because your staff treats me like an intruder, which means they'll happily testify that I'm not a real duchess. And because if we're going to lie convincingly, we need to build a truth worth lying about. Silence. Then Rowan stood and crossed to a cabinet. He pulled out a ledger and set it on the desk. The accounts. Mrs. Thorne has a duplicate, but this is the master copy. He met her eyes. Don't make me regret this. I'll try not to. She took the ledger and turned to leave. Eliza. She stopped. He so rarely used her first name that hearing it now felt strange. Thank you, he said quietly, for staying with Margot last night. She hasn't slept through the night in months. She needed someone. She needed you. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, not warmth exactly, but a flicker of mutual respect. Recognition that they were in this together, for better or worse. We'll make this work, Eliza said. One way or another. He nodded. Yes, we will. She left with the ledger under her arm and a sense of purpose burning in her chest. The war had started, and she was done playing defense. Over the next few weeks, Blackthorn Hall transformed. Not dramatically, Eliza was too smart for that, but steadily. She dismissed 2 maids who spent more time gossiping than working and hired replacements from the village. She reorganized the kitchens, implemented new schedules, and started hosting small dinners for local families. Nothing ostentatious, just enough to establish a presence. Mrs. Thorne fought her every step. But Eliza had the ledgers, the authority, and most importantly, Margot's growing trust. The child still didn't speak, but she followed Eliza everywhere, a silent shadow that spoke louder than words ever could. Rowan watched it all with something that might have been approval or astonishment, possibly both. Then, 6 weeks before the hearing, everything went wrong. A letter arrived. Rowan read it in his study while Eliza reviewed supplier contracts. She heard him swear, sharp, vicious, and looked up. What is it? He crumpled the letter. The Earl has changed tactics. He's filed an emergency motion claiming Margot is in immediate danger. There's a hearing in 3 days. 3 days? That's impossible to prepare for. Which is the point. He stood, pacing. They're going to argue that our marriage is fraudulent, that the household is unstable, and that Margot should be removed immediately pending the full custody hearing. Can they do that? If the judge believes them, yes. Eliza's stomach dropped. What do we need? Evidence, testimony, proof that this isn't a sham. He turned to her. They're going to put you on the stand, Eliza. They're going to ask you things designed to break you, to make you stumble, to prove you're just an actress playing a role. Then I won't stumble. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. She stood. I've spent 3 years disappearing, Rowan, fading into the background because that's how I survived. But I'm done being invisible. If they want to question me, let them. I'll tell them the truth. The truth will destroy us. No. A lie will destroy us. But the truth, she moved closer. The truth is that we entered this marriage as strangers with a mutual goal. The truth is that we've built something functional, maybe even something good. The truth is that Margot is thriving here, and that's not an act. You think that's enough? It has to be. They stared at each other. Outside, storm clouds gathered. Inside, the stakes had never been higher. 3 days later, they stood in a courthouse that smelled of old wood and older money. The Earl and his wife sat across the aisle, their lawyer, a predator in expensive clothes, smiling like he'd already won. The judge entered. Everyone stood. And Eliza realized that everything, her future, Rowan's, Margot's, was about to be decided by strangers who didn't know them and didn't care. The lawyer stood. Your Honor, we call Lady Eliza Blackthorne to the stand. Rowan's hand found hers under the table. Brief, warm, surprising. She squeezed back. Then she stood and walked toward the witness box, toward the questions that would either save them or destroy everything they'd built. The oath was administered. She sat. The lawyer smiled. Lady Blackthorne, he said, his voice dripping false courtesy, let's talk about your marriage. The courtroom smelled like old wood and expensive cologne. Eliza stood in the corridor outside, her palms damp despite the cold that seeped through the stone walls. Through the heavy oak doors, she could hear voices, muffled, formal, deadly. Ready? Rowan asked beside her. She turned. He looked composed, immaculate in his dark suit, but she'd learned to read the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers flexed against his leg when he was calculating odds. No, she said honestly, but that doesn't matter, does it? Not even slightly. The doors opened. A clerk gestured them forward. Inside, the chamber was smaller than she'd imagined, intimate in a way that made everything feel more dangerous. High windows let in gray morning light that fell across rows of wooden benches. At the front, 3 judges sat behind an elevated bench, their faces impassive. To the left, the Earl and Countess of Ashford occupied chairs with their solicitor, a thin man with spectacles who looked like he enjoyed other people's misery. And there, in the witness section, sat Margot. Eliza's chest tightened. The girl looked tiny in that chair, her dark hair braided neatly, her hands folded in her lap. Someone had dressed her in pale blue, calculated innocence. When Margot's eyes found Eliza's, something flickered there. Fear? Hope? Both? Rowan's hand brushed Eliza's elbow, guiding her forward. They took their seats at the defendant's table. Their solicitor, Mr. Brennan, a grizzled veteran who'd seen worse battles than this, leaned close. "They'll attack the marriage first," he whispered. "Establish it as fraudulent. Once that foundation cracks, everything else collapses." "How do we stop them?" Eliza asked. "You don't. You weather it. And you don't break." The head judge, a silver-haired woman named Justice Carmichael, called the proceedings to order. Her voice cut through the room like a blade through silk. "This hearing will determine the question of guardianship for Lady Margot Blackthorne. The petitioners, the Earl and Countess of Ashford, assert that the current guardian, Duke Rowan Blackthorne, is unfit due to concerns regarding household stability and emotional capacity. The Duke contests these claims. We will hear testimony from both parties and render judgment based on the child's best interests." She glanced down at her notes. "Mr. Whitmore, you may begin." The Earl's solicitor stood. He was younger than Brennan, sharper, with the kind of confidence that came from knowing he held good cards. "Thank you, Justice Carmichael. The petitioner's case is straightforward. Duke Blackthorne, though possessed of considerable resources, has demonstrated a pattern of isolation, emotional unavailability, and questionable judgment. Most notably, he contracted a marriage of suspicious timing and questionable authenticity, a marriage that appears designed solely to circumvent this court's legitimate concerns about his suitability as a guardian." Rowan's expression didn't change, but Eliza felt the temperature drop beside her. "We will demonstrate," Whitmore continued, "that this so-called marriage is a legal fiction, a calculated deception meant to present false evidence of stability. We will show that the Duke and his wife," he said the word like it tasted bad, "maintained separate lives, share no genuine bond, and entered into this arrangement purely as a strategic maneuver. In short, Your Honors, we will prove that everything about this household is performance, not reality. And a child deserves better than theater." He sat. The courtroom held its breath. Justice Carmichael looked at Brennan. "Response?" Brennan rose slowly, his movements deliberate. "The petitioners will waste this court's time with speculation and innuendo. But facts are stubborn things. The facts are these. Duke Blackthorne has provided exemplary care for his niece. The household at Blackthorne Hall is stable, well-managed, and loving. His marriage to Duchess Eliza Blackthorne is legal, recognized, and genuine. The petitioner's real motivation isn't concern for the child. It's a transparent attempt to seize control of the Blackthorne estate and fortune through the guise of guardianship. We trust this court will see through such obvious manipulation." He sat. Eliza caught a glimpse of the Countess's face, pinched, furious. "Very well," Justice Carmichael said. "Call your first witness, Mr. Whitmore." The petitioners call Lady Adelaide Ashford, Countess of Ashford. The Countess stood. She was in her 60s, dressed in mourning gray that made her look like a professional widow. Her face was arranged in an expression of noble suffering as she took the witness stand. Whitmore approached. "Lady Ashford, please describe your relationship to the child in question." "Margot is my late nephew's daughter," the Countess said, her voice trembling just enough to suggest deep emotion without losing control. "When my dear nephew Edmund and his wife perished in that terrible accident, I felt it was my sacred duty to ensure their daughter was properly cared for." "And what are your concerns regarding the Duke's guardianship?" "Where do I begin?" She dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "The Duke lives like a hermit in that dreadful, isolated estate. He has no friends, no social connections appropriate for raising a child. He's obsessed with his work, his investments, his legal battles. A child needs warmth, affection, normalcy, not cold calculation." "What about his recent marriage?" The Countess's expression hardened. A transparent fraud. 3 months ago, the Duke was unmarried. Suddenly, when faced with this hearing, he produces a wife, a woman of no family, no connections, no social standing. Please. It's obvious what happened. He purchased a bride to make himself look respectable. Objection, Brennan said mildly. Speculation. Sustained, Justice Carmichael said. Lady Ashford, restrict your testimony to facts. The Countess pursed her lips. The fact is that I've observed them together exactly once, at a charity function last month. They barely spoke. No affection, no warmth. They stood 3 feet apart like strangers. That is not a marriage. It's a business arrangement. Whitmore let that settle. And in your opinion, what would be in Margot's best interests? A proper home, with her family, where she can be surrounded by love, stability, and people who actually care about her welfare rather than using her as a legal pawn. Thank you, Lady Ashford. Brennan stood for cross-examination. He moved slowly, like a predator measuring its approach. Lady Ashford, you mentioned observing the Duke and Duchess at a charity function. That was the Pemberton Hospital Gala, correct? Yes. How long were you there? Perhaps 2 hours. And during those 2 hours, how much time did you spend directly observing the Duke and Duchess? Her eyes narrowed. Enough. Enough isn't a measurement of time. Was it 5 minutes, 10, 30? I don't recall exactly. So you're basing your opinion about the authenticity of their marriage on brief observations at a public event? I'm basing it on common sense. Common sense, Brennan repeated. Let me ask you something else. When did you last visit Blackthorn Hall? The Countess hesitated. It's been some time. How long? Several years. So you have no direct knowledge of the current household? I have knowledge of the Duke's character. Based on what? How many conversations have you had with him in the past year? He doesn't encourage conversation. That's not an answer. How many? None, she admitted, anger creeping into her voice. He refuses to see me. Perhaps because you filed a lawsuit against him. I filed because he's unfit. Or because you want control of your nephew's estate, which Margot stands to inherit. Objection! Whitmore shot to his feet. Baseless accusation. Withdrawn, Brennan said smoothly. No further questions. The Countess stepped down, her face flushed. Eliza watched her return to her seat, saw the way the Earl's hand closed over hers. Not comfort, but control. They're losing, she thought, but that makes them more dangerous. Whitmore called 2 more witnesses, a neighbor who'd never been inside Blackthorn Hall but had heard things, and a doctor who'd treated the Duke for insomnia and testified about concerning patterns of stress and isolation. Brennan dismantled both, but the damage accumulated in small ways, building a portrait of a man too cold, too damaged, too dangerous to raise a child. Then Whitmore dropped his bomb. The petitioners call Miss Sarah Winters. Eliza didn't recognize the name, but Rowan went rigid beside her. A woman in her 30s took the stand. She was pretty in a faded way, with blonde hair and nervous hands. Miss Winters, Whitmore began gently, please tell the court your former employment. I was a governess at Blackthorn Hall. I cared for Lady Margot for 6 months. And why did your employment end? I was dismissed. By whom? The Duke. Did he give a reason? Her voice dropped. He said I wasn't suitable. But the truth is, I saw things. The way he'd shut himself in his study for days. The way he'd look at Margot sometimes, like she was a problem to solve, not a child to love. I tried to reach out to help, but he wouldn't let anyone close. It scared me. So I expressed concerns and he got rid of me. Rowan's jaw clenched. Eliza's mind raced. This woman was lying, or at least distorting truth into weapon. Did you ever fear for the child's safety? Whitmore asked. Yes. Not physical danger, but emotional. That kind of coldness, it damages children. Thank you, Miss Winters. Brennan stood. Miss Winters, you were dismissed 6 months into your employment, is that correct? Yes. And how many governesses had the Duke employed before you? I believe I was the 3rd. And after you left, how many has he employed? I don't know. None, Brennan said flatly, because Duchess Eliza Blackthorn took over primary care responsibilities. But let's discuss your dismissal. You testified that the Duke fired you for expressing concerns. That's your version. Would you like to hear his? She paled. I don't know what you mean. The Duke dismissed you because you were discovered reading his private correspondence without permission. You were also found in areas of the house you'd been explicitly forbidden to enter. Isn't that true? I was concerned about the child. You were snooping, and when confronted, you made vague accusations about the Duke's character to justify your behavior. Then you offered your testimony to the petitioners in exchange for a recommendation letter, didn't you? That's not... Did the Countess write you a recommendation? Silence. I'll take that as confirmation, Brennan said. No further questions. But the damage was done. Eliza could see it in the judges' faces, doubt accumulating like storm clouds. They broke for lunch. In a private room, Eliza paced while Rowan sat motionless, staring at nothing. That woman lied, Eliza said. She also told the truth, Rowan replied quietly. The parts about me shutting myself away, being cold, those were true. But the rest doesn't matter. Whitmore is building a narrative. Every witness adds another brick. By the time they're done, the judges will see exactly what the Earl wants them to see. A damaged man playing house with a purchased wife. Then we need to break the narrative. How? Eliza stopped pacing. By changing the story. They're attacking the marriage, right? Calling it fake, strategic, empty. So we prove it's real. It's not real, Rowan said bluntly. It's exactly what they say it is. A legal arrangement. It started that way, but it changed. You know it did. He looked at her finally, really looked at her. Did it? The question hung between them. Eliza thought about the past 3 months, the late-night conversations in the library, the way he'd started seeking her opinion on Margot's education. The afternoon she'd found him teaching the child to ride and seeing genuine joy crack through his armor. The way his hand had found hers during the storm last week, when Margot had nightmares and they'd sat together in the dark until dawn. Yes, she said. It did. Maybe not in the way people expect. Maybe not perfectly. But it became something real. And if we don't show them that, we lose everything. What are you proposing? Let me testify. Absolutely not. Whitmore will tear you apart. Let him try. I've survived worse than lawyers. Rowan stood. You don't understand what you're offering. He'll go after your past, your family, every vulnerability. I'm already vulnerable. Her voice rose. I was invisible for years, Rowan, dead to society. You gave me a chance to matter again, and I'm not going to let these people take that away because I'm afraid of questions. I know who I am, I know why I'm here. And I know what we've built, even if it's messy and incomplete. So unless you have a better plan, I'm taking that stand. He stared at her. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. You're either very brave or very foolish. Probably both. All right, we'll tell Brennan. But Eliza... He stepped closer. Once you're up there, there's no retreat. Whatever happens, we face it together. That's the point of marriage, isn't it? This time he did smile. Brief, barely there, but real shout. The afternoon session opened with Whitmore calling Rowan to the stand. Eliza watched her husband cross the courtroom, watched him take the oath, watched his face become a mask. Whitmore circled like a shark. Duke Blackthorne, let's discuss your marriage. When did you meet your wife? The day of our wedding. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Whitmore looked delighted. You married a woman you'd never met? I'd seen her photograph and reviewed her qualifications. It was sufficient. Sufficient. Interesting word choice. Was love involved in this decision? No. Affection? No. So it was purely transactional. Rowan's gaze didn't waver. It was practical. I needed a wife to secure guardianship. She needed security. We made an arrangement. An arrangement, Whitmore repeated, savoring each syllable. Not a marriage. Marriage is a legal contract. We fulfilled its requirements. But surely marriage is more than legality. It's partnership, emotional connection, intimacy. Objection, Brennan said. Counsel is testifying. Sustained. But Whitmore wasn't finished. Let me ask you this, Duke Blackthorne. Do you love your wife? The courtroom went silent. Eliza's breath caught. Rowan looked at Whitmore, then at the judges, then, finally, at Eliza. His dark eyes held hers. I respect her, he said slowly. I trust her judgment. I value her presence in my life and in Margot's. Whether that constitutes love by your definition, I can't say. But it's real. And it's more than most marriages I've observed. Whitmore pounced. So you don't love her? I didn't say that. I said I don't know if what I feel fits your definition. I'm not a romantic man, Mr. Whitmore. I don't speak in poetry or grand gestures, but I know what matters: loyalty, partnership, shared purpose. Those we have. How convenient. Whitmore's voice dripped scorn. Tell me, Duke, do you share a bedroom? Brennan stood. Objection. Irrelevant and invasive. It goes to the question of authenticity, Your Honor. Justice Carmichael frowned. I'll allow it, but tread carefully, counsel. Whitmore turned back to Rowan. Do you? No. Do you take meals together? When schedules permit. How often is that? Perhaps 4 times a week. So you live separate lives under the same roof? We have separate responsibilities. I manage the estate. She manages the household and Margot's education. Sounds more like business partners than spouses. Rowan's expression hardened. Perhaps that's what marriage is, stripped of illusion. 2 people working toward common goals. I provide security. She provides stability. Together we give Margot something neither of us could offer alone. A home. Or a performance of one. Believe what you want. The fact remains that in 3 months my wife has accomplished what the Earl and Countess couldn't in 7 years. She made Margot feel safe. That landed. Eliza saw it register with the judges. Whitmore shifted tactics. Let's discuss your brother's death. Rowan went very still. What about it? There were irregularities in the investigation, weren't there? Questions about the accident's circumstances? There were rumors, that's all. Rumors that you were involved. Brennan exploded to his feet. Objection! This is outrageous! I'll allow it, Justice Carmichael said quietly. Answer the question, Duke Blackthorne. Rowan's voice went cold. I was investigated and cleared. The accident was ruled accidental. If you're suggesting otherwise, produce evidence or withdraw the question. I'm suggesting, Whitmore said softly, that a man under suspicion for his brother's death might not be the ideal guardian for his brother's child. Then you're a fool, Rowan said flatly. My brother was my closest friend. His death nearly destroyed me. I spent months hunting for answers because I couldn't accept that he was gone. When the investigation concluded, I accepted it because I had no choice. But don't you dare stand there and imply I had anything to do with his death. And don't use my grief as a weapon in your legal game. Silence. Even Whitmore looked taken aback by the raw fury in Rowan's voice. No further questions, he said finally. Rowan stepped down. As he passed Eliza, their eyes met. In his face, she saw something she'd never seen before. Vulnerability. He's breaking, she thought. They're wearing him down. Brennan called character witnesses. Mrs. Thorne, who testified about the improved household atmosphere. A tutor who praised Margot's educational progress. A neighbor who'd actually been inside Blackthorne Hall and described warmth and stability. But the damage had been done. The judges looked tired, uncertain. Then just before closing arguments, Brennan stood. The defense calls Duchess Eliza Blackthorne. Eliza rose. Every eye turned to her. She felt the weight of scrutiny, the skepticism. To them, she was a puzzle piece that didn't fit. A nobody who'd married power. She took the stand. Brennan approached with a reassuring nod. Your Grace, please tell the court how you came to marry the Duke. I was approached by his representative with a proposal. Marry him for a year, help stabilize his household, assist with his niece's care. In exchange, I'd receive security and financial compensation. So you accepted a business arrangement? I accepted an opportunity. I was broke, desperate, and out of options. The Duke offered me a way out. I took it. That's honest. And now? 3 months later, do you still view it as just business? Eliza looked at Rowan. He sat motionless, watching her. No, she said. It became something else. I can't tell you exactly when or how, but somewhere between managing the household and learning Margot's favorite stories and arguing with my husband about property management, somewhere in all those ordinary moments, it became real. Not perfect. Not what romance novels promise, but real in a way that matters. Can you elaborate? We don't have a traditional marriage. We argue. We disagree. He's stubborn and infuriating, and I'm sure he'd say the same about me. But when Margot has nightmares, we sit with her together. When estate problems arise, we solve them together. When I'm overwhelmed, he helps. When he's drowning in grief or stress, I anchor him. That's partnership. That's marriage. It's not always pretty, but it's ours. Brennan smiled slightly. Thank you, Your Grace. Whitmore stood. He looked like a man who'd been saving his best ammunition. Duchess Blackthorne, or should I say Miss Whitmore? That was your name 3 months ago, wasn't it? It was. Before your elevation to Duchess, you were living in a boarding house, correct? Struggling to pay rent? Yes? Your family lost everything in scandal. Your father died in disgrace. You were, by all accounts, socially dead. Invisible. That's correct. So when a duke offers you security, title, wealth, of course you'd say yes. Who wouldn't? Many people, actually. It required giving up autonomy, privacy, and entering a world where people like you would question my every motive. That takes courage or desperation. I had both. Or you saw an opportunity to trade poverty for luxury. I saw an opportunity to matter again. There's a difference. Is there? Whitmore leaned against the rail. Tell me, how much are you being paid for this arrangement? Brennan objected. Irrelevant. It goes to motive, Your Honor. I'll allow it. Eliza met Whitmore's eyes. £5,000 per year plus living expenses. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Whitmore looked triumphant. £5,000. That's quite an incentive to perform the role of devoted wife, isn't it? It's compensation for work. I manage a household, educate a child, and navigate a social world that would rather see me fail. If you think that's easy or comfortable, you're welcome to try it. But surely the money influenced your decision to marry. Of course it did. I'm not a fool. But money doesn't make you get up at 3 a.m. when a child has nightmares. Money doesn't make you genuinely care when your husband is struggling. Money doesn't create the moments when you look at someone and think, I'm glad you're here. Those things happen despite the arrangement, not because of it. Whitmore changed angles. You've been married 3 months. In that time, have you and the Duke shared any physical intimacy? Eliza felt her face heat, but she kept her voice steady. That's none of your business. It's relevant to whether this is a real marriage. Plenty of real marriages lack physical intimacy. Are you suggesting those couples don't love each other? I'm suggesting that your marriage is a legal fiction designed to manipulate this court. And I'm telling you that you're wrong. Eliza's voice rose. I didn't come here expecting to care about anyone. I came to survive. But Margot changed that. And so did Rowan. Is our marriage conventional? No. Did it start for the wrong reasons? Probably. But it became something worth fighting for, and I won't let you reduce it to a transaction just because it doesn't fit your narrow definition of what love should look like. Whitmore opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, he looked uncertain. No further questions, he said. Eliza stepped down. Her legs felt unsteady. As she passed Rowan, he caught her hand. Brief, barely noticeable, but there. Justice Carmichael called for closing arguments. Brennan and Whitmore each made their cases, but Eliza barely heard them. Her heart was hammering too hard. Finally, Justice Carmichael spoke. This court will adjourn to deliberate. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 10 to deliver our decision. The gavel fell. They left the courthouse in silence. Outside, rain had started again, turning the streets into rivers of mud. Rowan's carriage waited. Inside, they sat across from each other, not speaking. The city rolled past, disappearing into countryside. You didn't have to do that, Rowan said finally. Yes, I did. They'll tear apart everything you said, find inconsistencies, twist meanings. Let them. I told the truth. That's all I can do. He looked at her. Rain streaked the window behind him, fracturing the light. You asked if our marriage changed, he said quietly. If it became real. I remember. It did. I don't know when. Maybe the night you stayed with Margot through her fever. Maybe when you told off Lord Pemberton at that dinner for his comments about women's education. Maybe all the small moments in between. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being an arrangement and became something I don't want to lose. Eliza's throat tightened. Rowan, don't. Let me finish. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. I'm not good at this. Feelings, words, any of it. I've spent years building walls because vulnerability got my brother killed, or that's what I tell myself. But you walked into those walls and somehow made yourself at home. You challenged me. You didn't let me hide. And now I'm sitting here terrified that tomorrow those judges will rip everything apart and I'll lose not just Margot, but you. You won't lose me. You don't know that. If we lose custody, the marriage serves no purpose. You could walk away, take your money, and start fresh somewhere else. No one would blame you. Is that what you think I'd do? I think you're smart enough to cut your losses. Eliza crossed the space between them, taking the seat beside him. She took his hand, scarred, strong, shaking slightly. I'm not leaving, she said. Win or lose tomorrow, I'm not leaving. Because you're right, this became real. And real things are worth fighting for, even when they're messy and complicated and started for all the wrong reasons. He stared at their joined hands. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. For the first time since the courthouse, he almost smiled. Stubborn woman. You wouldn't want me any other way. The carriage rolled on through rain that felt like the world washing itself clean. Ahead, Blackthorn Hall waited, dark stone against darker sky. Tomorrow, their fate would be decided. Tonight, they had this. Two people who'd found each other in desperation and built something neither expected. It would have to be enough. Morning came too fast. Eliza dressed in dark blue, strong, serious, respectable. Downstairs, she found Margot at breakfast, pushing food around her plate. You're not eating, Eliza observed. I'm not hungry. Nervous? Margot nodded. Her eyes were red-rimmed. What if they make me go away? Eliza sat beside her. Then we'll fight it. Every legal avenue, every appeal. But what if they win? Then we'll find another way. But Margot, listen to me. She took the girl's small hand. Whatever happens today, you are loved. Your uncle loves you. I love you. That doesn't change, no matter what those judges say. Do you really love me? Or is it part of the arrangement? The question hit like a punch. Eliza looked into those young, scared eyes and saw herself at that age, learning too early that love was conditional, that security was fragile. I really love you, she said softly. I didn't expect to. I didn't even want to, because loving people means they can hurt you, but you made it impossible not to. You're brave and smart and kind, and I'm proud to be part of your life. That's real. Nothing about it is pretend. Margot's face crumpled. She threw her arms around Eliza, sobbing. Eliza held her, feeling the small body shake, feeling her own eyes burn. Rowan appeared in the doorway. He took in the scene, his expression softening. Ready? He asked. No, Eliza said. But we're going anyway. They rode to the courthouse together, all three of them. Margot sat between them, holding both their hands. A family, Eliza thought. However we started, this is what we've become. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread. People wanted to see how it ended. The cold duke and his purchased bride versus blood family. Drama, wrapped in legal formality. They took their seats. The judges entered. Justice Carmichael looked grave. We've reached a decision, she said. The room held its breath. The question before this court was guardianship, specifically whether Duke Blackthorn provides a suitable home for Lady Margot. The petitioners argued that the Duke's marriage is fraudulent, his household unstable, his emotional capacity insufficient. They painted a picture of a man using a child as a legal pawn. Eliza's nails dug into her palms. The defense countered that the Duke, with his wife's support, has created a genuine home. That their marriage, while unconventional in origin, has become authentic. That together they offer Margot stability, education, and love. Justice Carmichael looked at Margot. This court also heard from the child herself, not in formal testimony, but in observation. We watched her throughout these proceedings. We noted who she looked to when frightened, who she reached for when stressed. Actions, not words, revealed the truth. A pause. Then, guardianship is granted to Duke Rowan Blackthorn. The courtroom erupted. The Countess shot to her feet, shouting. The Earl tried to calm her. Whitmore looked stunned, but Eliza heard none of it. She turned to Rowan, saw shock in his face giving way to relief. He pulled Margot into his arms, holding her tight. The girl was crying, laughing, both at once. Then Rowan reached for Eliza, pulling her into the embrace. The three of them held each other while the chaos swirled around them. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair. "Thank you." They'd won. Against odds, against enemies, against their own doubts. They'd won. But as they stood there, as the judges called for order, as the Countess's furious voice cut through the noise, Eliza felt a chill run down her spine. Victory, she realized, didn't mean safety. The Ashfords were leaving, but the Countess turned at the door. Her eyes found Eliza's across the crowded room. In that gaze, Eliza saw pure hatred and something else. A promise. "This isn't over," that look said. "This is just beginning." And as guards had to escort the Countess out, as her shouts echoed down the hall, "You'll regret this, all of you," Eliza understood the truth. They'd won the battle, but the war had just started. The Countess's threat still echoed in Eliza's mind 3 days later as she stood in Blackthorn Hall's library, staring at a stack of legal documents that had arrived that morning. Outside, autumn had turned vicious, wind tearing leaves from trees, rain hammering the windows like it wanted inside. "They're contesting the ruling," Rowan said from behind her. She turned. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before the trial. Victory should have brought relief. Instead, it had brought more war. On what grounds? Everything they can think of, procedural errors, bias, new evidence they claim to have discovered. He picked up one of the documents, scanned it, threw it down. "They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Can they overturn it?" Brennan says no. "But if they can drag it out, make our lives hell, bleed us with legal fees." His jaw tightened. The Earl has deep pockets and nothing but time. Eliza moved to the window. The ground stretched out below, wild and wind-torn. In the distance, she could see Margot with Mrs. Thorne, collecting fallen branches for kindling. The girl was laughing, her hair whipping around her face. "She's happy," Eliza said. "For the first time since I met her, she actually looks like a child, instead of someone carrying the weight of the world." "I know. We can't let them take that away." "I don't intend to." Rowan came to stand beside her. "But I need you to understand something. The Ashfords won't stop. This ruling humiliated them publicly. The Countess's reputation is damaged. The Earl's credibility is questioned. They'll come at us harder now, and they won't be subtle about it." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that being my wife just became more dangerous than it was before." Eliza turned to face him. "You think I didn't know that? I saw her face in the courtroom, Rowan. I know what hatred looks like. Then you also know that staying here means becoming a target. Is that what you want? For me to leave?" "No." The word came out harsh. "But I need you to choose this consciously, not because of some contract or obligation, but because you want to fight this battle." "I already chose. In that courtroom, when I testified. When I held Margot this morning and promised her we'd protect her. I chose." She stepped closer. "But I'm not just going to sit here and wait for them to attack. We need to go on offense." "What do you mean?" "The Ashfords' power comes from their reputation. Old family, respectable, morally superior. But reputations can be broken. We need to find their weaknesses and exploit them." Rowan studied her, something like admiration flickering in his eyes. "You've been thinking about this." "I've been thinking about nothing else. They called our marriage a fraud, our household unstable. So we show the world the opposite. Not just in court documents, but in reality. We make Blackthorn Hall into something undeniable. A place so obviously stable and successful that any attack on it looks petty and desperate." "How?" "We open the doors, throw a ball. Invite everyone who matters, including people who've been whispering about us. Let them see Margot thriving. Let them see us together. Force them to confront the fact that we're real." "That's insane. Half the people we'd invite hate me." "Exactly. Which means half will come just to gawk. And once they're here, we control the narrative." She grabbed his arm. "Think about it. The Ashfords are painting us as isolated, damaged, barely functional. We prove them wrong publicly, loudly, and we do it before they can file another motion. We steal their momentum. And if it backfires? If people come and leave convinced the Ashfords are right, then we're no worse off than we are now. But if it works, if we can shift public opinion even slightly, their legal attacks lose teeth. Judges read newspapers, they hear gossip, Social reality affects legal reality. Rowan was silent, calculating. She could see him weighing risks, measuring outcomes. It would take weeks to plan, he said finally. We have weeks. Their next filing isn't due for a month. It would cost a fortune. You have a fortune. People will talk. People are already talking. Let's give them something better to say. He looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head, not in refusal, but in wonder. You're either brilliant or completely reckless. I told you before, both. This time, when he smiled, it reached his eyes. All right, we'll do it your way, but if this falls apart, it won't. You sound very certain. I am. Because I'm not letting those people win. Not after everything we've survived to get here. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. What did I do to deserve you? Offered me £5,000 and separate bedrooms. Really swept me off my feet with that proposal. He laughed, actual laughter, rare and rough but real. I should probably work on my romantic gestures. Later. Right now, we have a ball to plan. The next morning, Eliza sat down with Mrs. Thorne and the household staff. She laid out her plan like a general preparing for battle. We're hosting an event in 3 weeks. Everyone who's anyone will be invited. That means this house needs to be perfect. Not just clean, but stunning. Every room, every corner, every detail. I want people to walk in and immediately know they were wrong about us. Mrs. Thorne, who'd served the Blackthorne family for 30 years, raised an eyebrow. That's ambitious, Your Grace. It's necessary. Can it be done? With enough hands and enough time, anything can be done. But may I ask why the rush? Because our enemies are regrouping and we need to strike first. This house, this family, we're going to prove we're not just surviving, we're thriving. The housekeeper studied her, then nodded slowly. All right, but you'll need to make some decisions. The ballroom hasn't been used in years. The furniture is covered. The chandelier needs rewiring. Fix all of it, whatever it costs. The kitchen will need additional staff for the food. Hire them. The gardens. Bring in landscapers. I want this place to look like something out of a painting. Mrs. Thorne's expression shifted from skeptical to intrigued. You know, Your Grace, I've worked here since the old Duke's time. I've seen this family at its height and at its lowest. What you're proposing, it reminds me of how things used to be, before the isolation, before the grief. Then let's bring it back. Over the following days, Blackthorne Hall transformed. Workers swarmed the grounds, pruning hedges and planting late-season flowers that would survive until the event. Inside, the ballroom emerged from its dusty hibernation. Floors polished, chandeliers restored, walls repainted in deep blue and gold. The house came alive with noise and purpose. Eliza threw herself into every detail, driving herself and everyone around her to exhaustion. She reviewed menus with the cook, approved floral arrangements, personally inspected every room that guests might see. At night, she collapsed into bed too tired to think, which was exactly what she wanted. Rowan watched her with a mixture of concern and fascination. You're going to work yourself to death, he said one evening, finding her in the study at midnight, surrounded by seating charts. I'm fine. You're not. You barely eat. You don't sleep. I sleep enough. Eliza. He took the papers from her hands, forcing her to look at him. What are you really doing? I'm making this perfect. Why? It's just a party. No, it's not. Her voice cracked. It's our chance to prove we're not frauds, that Margot deserves to be here, that I deserve to be here. If I fail, you won't. You don't know that. I know you. You don't fail. You're too stubborn. She laughed, but it sounded broken. What if stubborn isn't enough? He pulled her up, wrapping his arms around her. She let herself lean into him, feeling the solid warmth of his chest, the steady beat of his heart. Then we'll fail together, he murmured. But we won't. Because you're right. This will work. Not because everything will be perfect, but because people will see what I see. A woman who turned a cold house into a home. Who took a frightened child and made her feel safe. Who married a bastard like me and somehow made it real. You're not a bastard. I'm difficult. That's different. Is it? She pulled back to look at him. Yes. Bastards don't care about anyone but themselves. You care so much it terrifies you. That's why you built walls. But caring isn't weakness, Rowan. It's the only thing that matters. He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of everything neither of them knew how to say. When they broke apart, his eyes were dark with emotion. "Come to bed," he said quietly. "I have work. It can wait. Come to bed. With me." She hesitated. They'd kept separate rooms for 3 months, honoring the boundaries of their arrangement. But arrangements changed. People changed. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I've never been more sure of anything." She took his hand. They climbed the stairs together, and for the first time since their wedding, there were no walls between them. The invitations went out a week before the event. Eliza had agonized over the guest list, who to include, who to pointedly exclude. In the end, she invited everyone, allies, enemies, neutral parties. Let them all come. Let them all see. The responses started arriving within days. Some were acceptances written in careful, neutral language. Others were polite refusals that barely masked contempt. But the majority accepted, probably out of curiosity more than support. But Eliza didn't care about motives. She cared about results. 3 days before the ball, disaster struck. The cook quit. "What do you mean she quit?" Eliza demanded, standing in the kitchen amid half-prepared dishes. Mrs. Thorne looked grim. "Someone offered her more money to leave. She wouldn't say who, but I'd bet my life it was the Countess." "That's spiteful." Eliza bit off the curse. "Fine. Find me another cook. Now." "Your Grace, every qualified cook within 50 miles is either employed or has already turned us down. Word got out about the event. People are reluctant." Reluctant or bought off? Both, probably. Eliza wanted to scream. Instead, she forced herself to think. What about the one who used to work at the Pemberton estate? Mrs. Harper? She retired 2 years ago. Retired doesn't mean dead. Find her. Offer her double whatever she was making. Triple. I don't care. Just get me someone who can feed 200 people in 3 days. Mrs. Thorne hesitated. There is one other option. What? You. Me. You've been working alongside the kitchen staff for weeks, Your Grace. You know the menus, you understand the dishes, and you're desperate enough to make it work. Eliza stared at her. The idea was insane. Duchesses didn't cook for their own balls, but desperate times required desperate measures. All right, she said. Clear the kitchen. Call in every kitchen maid we have. We're doing this ourselves. For the next 72 hours, Eliza barely left the kitchen. She cooked, directed, tasted, adjusted. Her hands got burned. Her back ached. She snapped at people and apologized minutes later. But slowly, impossibly, the food came together. Rowan found her at 2 a.m. the night before the ball, standing over a pot of sauce, stirring mechanically. Come to bed, he said. Can't. This needs to reduce for another hour. Then I'll wait with you. He pulled up a chair. They sat in silence. The only sound, the gentle bubble of the pot and the ticking of the kitchen clock. I got a letter today, Rowan said eventually. From the Earl's solicitor. Eliza's hand tightened on the spoon. And? They're withdrawing one of their motions, the one about procedural errors. Why? Because Brennan found evidence that the Earl's investigator falsified documents. If they'd proceeded, they'd have faced criminal charges. That's good news. It is. But it also means they're getting desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, but they also get dangerous. Let them get dangerous. So will we. He smiled slightly. You know, when I married you, I thought I was getting a quiet, manageable wife who'd stay in the background. Disappointed? Terrified. But not disappointed. She turned off the heat, covered the pot, and moved to sit beside him. Do you think this will work? Tomorrow? Honestly? I have no idea. But I know one thing. You've already won. How? Because 3 months ago, this house was dying. I was dying. Margot was drowning, and you walked in and refused to let any of it continue. You didn't fix everything perfectly or magically. You just refused to quit. That's victory, Eliza. Everything else is just details. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm scared. Good. Means you're smart. What if people come and leave convinced we're frauds? Then we'll deal with it. Together. Together, she repeated. I like the sound of that. So do I. The morning of the ball arrived cold and clear. Eliza woke to find Rowan already gone, probably dealing with last-minute preparations. She dressed carefully, a gown of deep emerald green that Mrs. Pierce had helped her choose, elegant without being ostentatious. Her hair was pinned up, a few strategic curls framing her face. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. 3 months ago, she'd been invisible, desperate, fading. Now she looked like someone who belonged in this house, who deserved to be here. Fake it until you make it, she thought. And maybe, just maybe, I've already made it. Downstairs, the house was chaos. Staff rushed everywhere, making final adjustments. The ballroom gleamed. The dining room tables were set with crystal and silver. Flowers filled every available space, their scent overwhelming. Eliza walked through it all, checking details, offering encouragement, hiding her nerves behind a mask of calm confidence. Mrs. Thorne caught her eye and nodded approvingly. At 6 o'clock, the first guests arrived, Lord and Lady Pemberton, neutral parties who could be swayed either way. They entered with polite expressions that gave nothing away, accepted champagne, and moved into the ballroom with measured steps. More guests followed. Allies first. People who'd supported Rowan during the custody battle. Then the curious. Those who'd come to judge. And finally the enemies. People who'd sided with the Ashfords and were now forced by social obligation to attend. Eliza stood beside Rowan in the receiving line, greeting each guest with practiced grace. She felt their eyes on her, judging, evaluating. Some were kind. Others barely masked their disdain. She smiled at all of them. Then the Countess arrived. The room went quiet. Everyone turned to watch. The Countess stood in the doorway, draped in black silk like she was attending a funeral. Her expression was cold fury barely contained. "Countess," Eliza said smoothly, moving forward, "how kind of you to come." "I came because refusing would have caused more talk than attending." The Countess's voice could have frozen wine. "Don't mistake obligation for approval. I wouldn't dream of it. Please, enjoy the evening." The Countess swept past, making her contempt obvious. But she'd come. That was what mattered. The ball proceeded, music played, people danced, food was served, and from the expressions on guests' faces, it was good. Conversations flowed. Gradually, the tension in the room began to ease. Eliza circulated, making polite conversation, deflecting subtle barbs with practiced ease. She saw Rowan across the room, doing the same. Their eyes met. He raised his glass slightly. She smiled. Then Lady Pemberton approached. She was a social powerhouse. Her opinion mattered to everyone who mattered. "Duchess Blackthorne," she said, "might we speak privately?" Eliza's stomach dropped, but she nodded. "Of course." They moved to a quiet corner. Lady Pemberton studied her with shrewd eyes. "I'm going to be direct," she said. "When you married the Duke, everyone assumed you were either desperate or calculating, probably both." "That's accurate. But tonight has been surprising. This house, the food, the atmosphere, it's remarkable. You've accomplished in 3 months what most women couldn't do in years." "I had good motivation." "Love?" Lady Pemberton's tone was skeptical. "Survival first, love came later, but yes." "Do you love him?" The question was too personal for casual conversation, but Eliza answered anyway. "Yes. Not the way novels describe it. It's messier, harder, but real." Lady Pemberton nodded slowly. "I believe you, and that matters because I've been watching the Countess tonight. She's furious. Whatever she hoped to accomplish by coming, whether it was sabotage or humiliation, she's failed. This event has undermined everything she's been saying about your household. Is that enough? To change opinions? In society? Opinions change like weather, quickly and for shallow reasons. But yes, tonight matters. You've proven you can navigate this world, that the Duke isn't isolated or unstable, that your marriage is real enough to function publicly. The Ashfords' legal arguments just got significantly weaker. Relief flooded through Eliza. Thank you for telling me. Don't thank me yet. The Countess won't accept defeat gracefully. She's already whispering poison to anyone who'll listen, but you've given her less ammunition. Lady Pemberton paused. You're tougher than you look, Duchess. I respect that. She walked away. Eliza stood alone for a moment, letting the words sink in. We're winning, she thought. Actually winning. The evening wore on. Dancing continued. Champagne flowed. Eliza found Rowan again, and they danced together. Properly this time. Not the awkward formality of their first attempts. He held her close, his hand warm against her back. Lady Pemberton said we've won, she murmured. She's not wrong. People are watching the Countess. They see her bitterness. It's not a good look. What happens now? Now we keep fighting, but from a stronger position. The music swelled. Other couples danced around them. For a moment, Eliza let herself feel it. The success, the relief, the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd built something strong enough to last. Then she saw Margot. The girl stood at the ballroom entrance wearing her nightgown, her face pale with fear. Mrs. Thorne was beside her, looking apologetic and worried. Eliza and Rowan broke apart, moving toward them quickly. "What's wrong?" Rowan asked. "There's someone here," Margot whispered. "In the house. I saw him from my window, going into your study." Ice flooded Eliza's veins. "Who?" "I don't know, but he didn't come through the front door. He climbed through a window." Rowan's expression went hard. "Stay here with Mrs. Thorne, both of you. Eliza, I'm coming with you." "No." "Yes. We do this together, remember?" He looked like he wanted to argue, then nodded sharply. "Fine, but stay behind me." They moved through the house quietly, leaving the ballroom's noise behind. The study was in the west wing, isolated from the party. As they approached, Eliza saw light under the door. Lamplight, not gas. Someone was inside. Rowan tried the handle, locked from within. "Break it," Eliza said. He kicked the door. It splintered open. Inside, a man stood at Rowan's desk, rifling through papers. He spun at the noise, his face going white. "John?" Rowan's voice was deadly quiet. "What the hell are you doing?" John, one of the estate managers, trusted for years, stammered. Your Grace, I can explain. You broke into my study during a ball to go through my private papers. There's no explanation that makes that acceptable. The Countess said you had documents about your brother's death. She said if I found them, she'd pay. You're working for her?" Rowan's voice dropped to something dangerous. "How long?" 6 months. She approached me after the custody filing. Said she needed information about the estate, about your finances. I didn't think. You didn't think? Rowan crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed John by his collar. "You've been spying on me for 6 months, feeding information to people trying to destroy my family? I needed the money. You don't pay enough." "I pay more than fairly. You betrayed me because you're greedy." Rowan shoved him away. "Get out. Now. If I ever see you again, I'll have you prosecuted for theft and espionage." John fled. His footsteps echoed down the hallway. Eliza moved to the desk, looking at the scattered papers. What was he after? Documents related to Edmund's death, investigation reports, insurance claims. Rowan's hands shook with rage. The Countess thinks there's proof I was involved. She's been looking for years. Is there proof? Of my innocence? Yes, but not the kind that satisfies conspiracy theorists. He sank into his chair, looking suddenly exhausted. She'll never stop, Eliza. Even if we win every legal battle, she'll keep searching for something to destroy me with. Eliza knelt beside him. Then we find it first. Whatever evidence exists about your brother's death, we find it and we make it public. End the speculation. Cut off her ammunition at the source. I've looked. The investigators found nothing. Then we look harder. Hire new investigators. Question old witnesses. Go through everything again. She took his hands. You said we fight together. This is part of the fight. He looked at her, and for a moment she saw fear in his eyes, raw and real. What if we find something I don't want to know? Then we deal with it. But not knowing is worse. It's letting her control the narrative. He was silent for a long moment, then nodded. All right, we'll start tomorrow. But tonight, we have guests to entertain and a victory to celebrate. They returned to the ballroom together. The party continued, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded. But now, watching the Countess hold court in the corner, Eliza saw her differently. Not as an unstoppable force, as a desperate woman making increasingly reckless moves. We're winning, Eliza thought again, and she knows it. The ball ended near midnight. Guests departed with warm farewells, genuine smiles, promises to visit again. Even those who'd come as enemies left looking thoughtful. When the last carriage rolled away, Eliza stood in the empty ballroom, surveying the wreckage of success. Discarded champagne glasses, trampled flowers, scuff marks on the polished floor. Rowan joined her. We did it. We did. They're talking about us, not with contempt, with interest, maybe even respect. Lady Pemberton says opinions are changing. They are. I could feel it tonight. The way people looked at us, at you especially, like you're a real duchess, not an imposter. I am a real duchess. I know. But now they know it too. She leaned against him, bone-tired but triumphant. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow, we start investigating Edmund's death. We find the truth, whatever it is, and we end this once and for all. Together? Always together. Outside, dawn was breaking, gray light creeping across the estate, chasing away shadows. In 3 months, Eliza had gone from invisible to indispensable, from desperate to powerful, from alone to loved. The Countess would keep fighting. There would be more battles, more threats, more nights of fear and uncertainty. But standing there in the ruins of their successful gamble, holding the man she'd married as a stranger and learned to love as a partner, Eliza felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope, not the fragile, desperate hope of survival. The strong, defiant hope of people who'd fought for what they had and refused to let it be taken away. They'd won tonight. Tomorrow, they'd win again. And the day after that, and the day after that, until the Ashfords had no choice but to accept defeat. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, victory felt possible. Victory felt possible, but possibility wasn't certainty. The morning after the ball, Eliza woke to find Rowan already gone. She dressed quickly and found him in the study, surrounded by boxes of documents that smelled like dust and old secrets. You started without me, she said. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot. Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about what John said, that the Countess believes there's proof I was involved in Edmund's death. If she's been searching for 6 months through my employee, what else has she found? Eliza picked up one of the files, insurance documents, investigation reports, witness statements. The official story was clean. Edmund's carriage had overturned on a rain-slicked road. Both he and his wife died instantly. Tragic accident. What do you remember about that day? She asked. Rowan's face went tight. Edmund came to see me that morning. We argued. About what? Money. He wanted to invest in some shipping venture. I told him it was too risky. He said I was always too cautious, that I didn't understand ambition. His voice cracked. Those were the last words we spoke. An argument about money. Then 6 hours later, he was dead. That's not your fault, isn't it? If I'd given him the money, maybe he wouldn't have been on that road. Maybe nothing. You didn't control the weather. You didn't sabotage his carriage. You had a disagreement with your brother, like siblings do. That's all. The Countess doesn't see it that way. She thinks I killed him to inherit the title and estate. Did the investigation consider that possibility? Of course. They looked at everything, my whereabouts, my finances, whether I had motive. I was cleared completely. But cleared doesn't mean believed, not when people want to think the worst. Eliza sat across from him. Then we prove it beyond doubt. Not just that you were innocent, but that there's a clear explanation for what happened. No room for speculation. How? The investigators already... Were they thorough? Or did they take the easy answer because you're a duke and they didn't want complications? That made him pause. You think they missed something? I think people miss things all the time, especially when they're not looking for them. We need someone who will look harder, someone with no loyalty to you or the Ashfords, someone who only cares about truth. Where do we find that person? Eliza thought about the past months, the people she'd met, the connections she'd made. Then it came to her. Lady Pemberton's brother. He used to be a magistrate before he retired. She mentioned once that he got bored with retirement and takes on private investigations for wealthy clients who need discretion. Will he help us? Only one way to find out. 3 days later, they sat in the drawing room of a London townhouse, facing a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite. Thomas Pemberton was 70 if he was a day, with white hair and eyes that missed nothing. Let me understand, he said, his voice gravelly. You want me to reinvestigate your brother's death, knowing that any evidence I find could be used against you? Yes, Rowan said. Why? Because I'm tired of living under suspicion. Because my niece deserves to grow up knowing the truth about her father's death, and because my wife deserves a husband who isn't haunted by unanswered questions. Pemberton looked at Eliza. And you support this? Even though it could destroy your marriage if he's guilty? He's not guilty, Eliza said firmly. But even if I'm wrong, I'd rather know the truth than live with comfortable lies. The old man studied them both, then nodded. I'll take the case, but I warn you, I follow evidence wherever it leads. If I find something damning, I won't bury it. We wouldn't want you to, Rowan said. Pemberton spent 2 weeks working. He interviewed witnesses the original investigators had dismissed as irrelevant. He examined the carriage wreckage, which had been stored in a warehouse and forgotten. He reviewed financial records, travel logs, weather reports. During those 2 weeks, the Ashfords filed 3 more legal motions, each one more desperate than the last. They claimed new evidence, procedural violations, judicial bias. Brennan shot them down one by one, but the attacks kept coming. They're panicking, Brennan said during one meeting. The ball changed everything. Public opinion has shifted. Even the judges who were sympathetic to the Ashfords are questioning their motives now. But that makes them more dangerous, not less. He was right. 2 days later, someone broke into Blackthorn Hall's stables and poisoned 3 horses. A week after that, a fire started in the East Wing, caught quickly, but deliberately set. The message was clear. If legal means failed, the Countess would try other methods. We need to end this, Eliza said, pacing the library while rain hammered the windows. Before someone gets hurt. Pemberton is working as fast as he can, Rowan said. It's not fast enough. The Countess is escalating. What's next? Threatening Margot directly? As if summoned by the words, Mrs. Thorne appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Your Grace, there's a man here to see you. He says it's urgent. Who? Thomas Pemberton. They found the investigator in the entrance hall, rain dripping from his coat. He looked grim but satisfied, the expression of a man who'd found exactly what he'd been looking for. I have answers, he said without preamble. But you won't like them. Eliza's stomach dropped. Rowan didn't... The Duke is innocent, Pemberton said quickly. Completely. But someone did tamper with that carriage, and I know who. They moved to the study. Pemberton laid out documents on the desk, mechanical diagrams, witness statements, financial records. The carriage accident wasn't an accident, he began. The axle was deliberately weakened. Whoever did it knew exactly where to make the cut so it would fail under stress, but not immediately. They wanted it to look like a natural break. Who? Rowan's voice was barely controlled. The Earl of Ashford. Silence. Then Rowan exploded. That's impossible. Why would he kill his own nephew? Money. Pemberton pulled out a ledger. Your brother Edmund discovered that the Earl had been embezzling from the family trust, money that should have gone to Edmund's inheritance and eventually to Margot. Edmund confronted him the day before he died, threatened to expose him unless he returned the funds. And the Earl killed him rather than face scandal? Eliza felt sick. More than scandal. Prison. Edmund had documented evidence. The Earl couldn't let that information become public, so he arranged an accident. He paid a stable hand to weaken the carriage axle and sent Edmund a message claiming there was an emergency at the family estate that required immediate travel. Edmund left in haste, in bad weather, on a dangerous road. The carriage failed exactly as planned. You have proof of this? Rowan asked. The stable hand confessed on his deathbed 3 years ago to a parish priest. The priest kept the confession sealed until I tracked him down and convinced him that justice mattered more than confidentiality. I also found the Earl's financial records, payments to the stable hand, withdrawals matching the embezzled amounts. It's all here. Rowan sank into his chair. The Earl murdered my brother, and then had the audacity to claim I'm unfit to raise Edmund's daughter. There's more, Pemberton said quietly. The Countess knew. Not about the murder initially, but she discovered the embezzlement last year. Instead of reporting it, she's been using it as leverage to control her husband. The custody battle was her idea. If they gain guardianship of Margot, they control the entire Blackthorn estate through her. It's not about protecting the child. It's about money and power. Eliza felt rage boiling in her chest. They killed Edmund and his wife. They've been terrorizing us for months, and all of it was to cover up theft and murder. What do we do? Rowan asked. Pemberton gathered his documents. You take this to the authorities. The Earl will be arrested, the Countess will be investigated as an accessory, and the custody case will be dismissed permanently. No court grants guardianship to a murderer's family. When? I'll file the report tomorrow morning. By noon, the Earl will be in custody. After Pemberton left, Eliza and Rowan sat in stunned silence. Outside, the storm was breaking, clouds parting to reveal stars. All this time, Rowan said finally, I thought Edmund died because of weather. Random chance. But it was murder, and I never suspected. How could you? You trusted your family. I should have looked harder, questioned more, protected him. Stop. Eliza moved to kneel beside him. You can't blame yourself for not predicting betrayal. The Earl is responsible. He made the choice to kill. You made the choice to honor your brother's memory by protecting his daughter. That's what matters. Is it enough? It's more than enough. Margot is safe. The truth is coming out. And tomorrow, the people who've been terrorizing us will face justice. He pulled her up, holding her tight. I couldn't have survived this without you. Yes, you could have. But you didn't have to. That's the point of us. The next morning, the news spread through society like wildfire. The Earl of Ashford arrested for murder and embezzlement. The Countess implicated as an accessory. The custody case permanently dismissed. Blackthorn Hall vindicated. By afternoon, visitors started arriving, people who'd doubted them, who'd whispered rumors, who'd sided with the Ashfords. They came with apologies, explanations, desperate attempts to repair burned bridges. Eliza received them all with cold courtesy. She accepted their words, but not their excuses. These were people who'd been ready to believe the worst, who'd watched a child's future hang in the balance and done nothing. You're angry, Lady Pemberton observed during one visit. Shouldn't I be? These people condemned us without evidence. They spread lies. They made Margot feel unwanted. They did, and they'll spend years trying to make it right. But anger is exhausting, Duchess. Eventually, you'll have to let it go. Will I? If you want peace, yes. Holding grudges gives them power over you. Better to accept their apologies, keep them at arm's length, and move forward. Eliza considered that. Is that what you do? It's what survivors do. We don't forgive easily, but we don't let hatred consume us either. We rebuild. We thrive. We prove that whatever tried to destroy us failed. That evening, Eliza found Margot in the garden, sitting beneath an apple tree that had just started blooming. The girl looked up as Eliza approached. Everyone's talking about my grandfather, Margot said quietly. About what he did. Eliza sat beside her. I know. Are you all right? I don't know how to feel. He's family. But he killed my father. You can feel both things. Grief and anger, confusion and relief. Emotions aren't simple, especially with complicated people. Do you think my father would be disappointed that I'm here with Uncle Rowan instead of with the Earl? I think your father would be grateful that you're safe, loved, and protected. That's all any parent wants for their child. Margot leaned against her. I'm glad you're here. So am I. Are you going to stay? Even though the custody case is over and you don't have to pretend anymore? Eliza pulled back to look at the girl. Is that what you think? That I've been pretending? Haven't you? The arrangement, Uncle Rowan told me about it before you came. He said you were helping him, but that it wasn't real. It started that way. But Margot, somewhere along the way, it became real. I'm not here because of a contract or obligation. I'm here because this is where I want to be. You're my family now, both of you. Promise? I promise. The legal proceedings against the Earl moved swiftly. The evidence was overwhelming. He confessed within days, probably hoping for leniency. He didn't get it. Murder was murder, regardless of motive. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. The Countess fought harder. She claimed ignorance, innocence, manipulation by her husband. But Pemberton's evidence showed she'd known about the embezzlement and used it for leverage. She was charged as an accessory and sentenced to 10 years. At the sentencing, Eliza and Rowan sat in the courtroom gallery. The Countess's eyes found them, still furious, still defiant, even in defeat. You've destroyed my family, she hissed as guards led her away. No, Rowan said quietly. Your husband did that when he murdered my brother. We just made sure you faced consequences. After the sentencing, they walked out into spring sunshine. The air smelled like rain and new growth. Around them, the city buzzed with normal life. People working, shopping, laughing. The world had kept turning through all of it. "It's over," Rowan said. "Is it?" "The Earl is in prison. The Countess is convicted. The custody case is closed. What else is there?" "Us," Eliza said, "figuring out what happens now that we don't have enemies forcing us together." He stopped walking. "Are you having doubts?" "No. But our marriage started as strategy. It continued through crisis. Now we have peace. Or at least the possibility of it. We need to decide who we are when we're not fighting for survival." "I know who I am," Rowan said. "I'm a man who was slowly dying until you walked into my life, who learned to feel again because you refused to let me hide. I'm the man who wants to spend every morning arguing with you about estate management and every night falling asleep beside you. That's who I am. The question is, who are you?" Eliza looked at him. This difficult, damaged, beautiful man who'd offered her survival and accidentally given her love. "I'm the woman who was invisible until you saw me," she said, "who learned she was stronger than she knew, who built a home out of a prison and a family out of strangers. I'm the woman who loves you even though you're impossible, especially because you're impossible." He kissed her there on the street, not caring who saw. When they broke apart, he was smiling, really smiling, open and genuine. "So what do we do now?" he asked. "Now? We go home, we raise Margot, we rebuild the estate, we live. Just live? Just live, no more drama, no more courtrooms, no more enemies, just ordinary, messy, beautiful life." Sounds boring. It sounds perfect. They returned to Blackthorn Hall to find it transformed yet again. Spring had fully arrived, bringing green to the gardens and warmth to the stone walls. Staff moved through rooms with purpose instead of fear. Margot's laughter echoed from the stables where she was learning to ride. That night they gathered for dinner, all three of them, plus Mrs. Thorne, who'd become more family than employee over the months. The table was full of food, conversation, jokes, normal things that had once seemed impossible. After Margot went to bed, Eliza and Rowan stood on the terrace, watching stars emerge. "I never thanked you," Rowan said. "For what?" "For saying yes that day. When Mrs. Pierce came to your boarding house and offered you an impossible choice, you could have refused, run from the danger and complication. But you didn't." "I didn't have better options." "You did. You could have found another teaching position, married someone safe, disappeared into obscurity, but you gambled on me, on us, and you won." "We won," she corrected. "Together." He pulled her close. "I love you. I don't say it enough, but I do. Desperately, inconveniently, eternally. Eternally is a long time. Not long enough." She kissed him, tasting wine and promise. "I love you too, even though you're stubborn and impossible and have the emotional communication skills of a rock." "A rock?" "A very attractive rock." He laughed. "I'll work on that." "Don't work too hard. I kind of like you difficult." They stood together as night deepened, two people who'd found each other in desperation and built something neither expected, a real marriage, a real family, a real life. The year that followed was quiet by comparison to the chaos that preceded it. They settled into routines, breakfast together, Margot's lessons, estate management, occasional trips to London for business. The scandal faded from public memory, replaced by newer gossip. Eliza found her place not just as Rowan's wife, but as her own person. She began working with a charitable organization that helped impoverished women find employment and housing, women like she'd been, invisible and desperate. She funded it with her allowance and eventually convinced Rowan to donate estate resources. "You're going to bankrupt us," he said, without heat, watching her review applications. "We can afford it. Besides, it's good for your reputation. The ruthless Duke Blackthorn, secretly charitable." "I'm not secretly anything. Everyone knows you're the one doing this." "Then they know you married someone who cares about more than parties and shopping." "I married someone who terrifies me daily with her competence and determination." "Good. Keeps you sharp." Margot thrived. She grew taller, more confident, happier. She stopped having nightmares, started making friends, began to look forward instead of back. One evening, nearly a year after the trial, she asked Eliza a question that made everything worth it. Can I call you Mother? Eliza's throat closed. You don't have to. I want to. My birth mother will always be important. I'll always remember her. But you're my mother now. The one who's here. Is that okay? It's more than okay. They held each other, and Eliza felt something break open in her chest. All the love she'd been holding back, afraid to presume, afraid to claim what wasn't offered. Now it was offered. Now it was real. That night, she told Rowan. She called me Mother. His eyes went bright. Good. That's what you are. I didn't expect it to matter so much, but it does. It's like I've been waiting my whole life to hear someone say that word and mean it. You've given her everything. Stability, education, love. Of course she sees you as her mother. I've given her what you gave me. A chance to be seen, to matter. We gave each other that, he corrected. You made me visible too, Eliza. Before you, I was just existing, going through motions. You made me live again. 2 years after their wedding, on a morning bright with possibility, Eliza woke to find Rowan watching her. What? She asked. Nothing. Just looking at my wife and thinking about how lucky I am. You're getting sentimental in your old age. I'm 32. Ancient. He pulled her close. Want to know a secret? Always. I'm happy. Genuinely, completely happy. I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again after Edmund died. But you gave it back to me. All of it. Joy, hope, purpose. Everything. She kissed him softly. You gave me the same thing. I was drowning when we met. You threw me a rope and then had the audacity to climb down into the water with me. We saved each other. Best decision I ever made. Marrying me? Saying yes when Mrs. Pierce suggested you. Well, second best decision. What was the first? Letting you testify in court. That changed everything. I thought you were against it. I was. But you did it anyway. That's when I knew. This woman is going to be the death of me or the making of me. Turned out to be both. They lay together as morning light filled the room, two people who'd found each other in darkness and built something that could withstand anything. Outside their window, Blackthorn Hall stretched across the landscape, no longer cold or isolated, but warm and alive. A home filled with love, laughter, purpose. Eliza had entered this house as a desperate woman with nothing to lose. She'd survived every attack, every doubt, every moment of fear. She'd proven herself not just to society or judges or enemies, but to herself. She was no longer invisible, no longer desperate, no longer afraid. She was a duchess, a mother, a wife, a force. She'd taken a marriage of convenience and transformed it into something real. She'd taken a frightened child and given her security. She'd taken a damaged man and loved him back to life. And in doing all of that, she'd found herself. The woman who'd been erased by scandal and poverty and shame had rebuilt herself into someone stronger, someone who mattered, someone who'd looked at impossible odds and refused to lose. Years later, when people asked about the Duke and Duchess of Blackthorn, they'd tell stories about the custody battle that shook society, about the ball that changed everything, about the investigation that exposed a murderer, about the love that grew from necessity into something unbreakable. But the truth was simpler than any story. Two people who needed each other found each other. They fought together, survived together, built together, and in the process, they created something neither had believed possible, a real family, born from desperation but sustained by love. Eliza stood on the terrace one evening, watching the sun set over the estate, and felt the weight of everything they'd survived. The fear, the battles, the victories. All of it had led here, to peace, to happiness, to home. Rowan joined her, slipping his hand into hers. What are you thinking? He asked. That I'd do it all again, every terrible moment, if it meant ending up here. With me? With all of it. You, Margot, this house, this life. Even the part where you lived in a boarding house and couldn't pay rent? Even that, because it brought me here. He kissed her temple. You know what I think? What? I think we won. Not just the custody case or the legal battles. We won everything. We took broken pieces and made something whole. That's victory. She turned to face him. I love you. I love you too. Always have. From the moment you walked into that chapel looking terrified but determined, I saw you then, really saw you, and knew my life was about to change completely. Was that a good thing? The best thing. You saved me, Eliza. In every way a person can be saved. We saved each other. Behind them, Margot's voice called from inside, something about dinner being ready, about a book she'd finished, about plans for tomorrow. Normal things. Beautiful things. They turned toward the house, toward their daughter, toward the life they'd built together. Eliza had started as the invisible survivor, the woman society had written off. But she'd become something more, a force that reshaped her world through strength, courage, and refusal to give up. She'd survived. She'd fought. She'd won. And in winning, she'd found something more valuable than victory. She'd found home. The stars came out above Blackthorn Hall, and inside its warm walls, a family lived. Imperfect, hard-won, real. And that was everything.